You don't notice the exact moment you became poorer. Nobody does. It happens slowly, quietly, invisibly, until one day you wake up and realize the world your grandparents lived in is gone, replaced by something colder, harsher, and designed to keep you running without ever arriving. Your grandfather could buy a home on one income. Your grandmother could raise a family without drowning in bills. A single salary once meant stability, dignity, and a future. Today, a degree is not enough. 2 jobs are not enough. Saving is not enough. You work harder than any generation before you, yet the finish line keeps moving farther away. The rent is rising. Groceries drain your wallet. Medical bills stalk you like wolves. Houses drift into the realm of fantasy. And you tell yourself it's just inflation, or a tough economy, or the world changing. But that's the lie they want you to believe. Because the truth is darker. The collapse already happened, not in the future, in 1971. And you were born into its aftermath. This isn't a story about personal failure. It's a story about a system collapsing quietly in the middle of the night while the world slept. A system designed to give ordinary people a fair shot, silently rewired into a machine that extracts more from you each year while giving less in return. The doom began not with an explosion, but with a signature. In the early 1970s, young families were planning their futures. Soldiers were returning home. Factories were roaring. A single paycheck could buy a house, a car, a vacation, and a sense of pride. The economy was stable, predictable. Prices barely moved. Money meant something. And then, on an ordinary August evening in 1971, everything changed. No alarm bells rang. No headlines screamed. No riots filled the streets. Just a few words spoken calmly on television. A decision made behind closed doors. A severed link between money and reality that rewrote the rules of your life long before you were born. Your grandparents didn't know it then, but the value of their labor was tied to something solid, something real. They lived in a world where money couldn't be created out of thin air, where governments couldn't fabricate wealth with a printing press, where savings retained value over time. But after 1971, the floor beneath everyone quietly cracked. The dollar was cut free from the thing that restrained it, gold. And when money lost its anchor, everything else drifted into madness. Wages froze, prices exploded, debt ballooned into a national addiction. The middle class began to erode from the bottom up. Your grandparents stood on stable ground. You inherited a sinkhole. And yet, nobody pointed to the real moment the descent began. People blamed globalization, immigration, technology, rising costs, falling wages, poor decisions, bad luck. Everything except the truth. Everything except the betrayal that rewired the world. Because if you knew what really happened, you'd see the pattern. You'd understand that your struggle isn't random. You'd realize the system is not broken. It is working exactly as intended. When money became limitless for them, it became worthless for you. The doom is not a warning. It is not a prediction. It is the world you already live in. You feel it every time you swipe your card, every time your rent goes up, every time your paycheck buys less, every time you wonder why your grandparents lived better lives with less education, less technology, and fewer working hours. It isn't because they were luckier. It's because they lived before the betrayal. 1971 didn't just change money, it changed the fate of generations. It turned time into debt, work into a treadmill, saving into a losing game, and the future into something you chase but never catch. This is the doom. Not fire, not chaos, not collapse, but a quiet theft, spread across decades, buried in charts and policy papers, hidden behind economic jargon designed to keep you confused. You were not meant to notice. You were meant to adapt. But once you see it, once you realize that your life is shaped by a decision made in a room you were never allowed to enter, you cannot unsee it. The collapse already happened, and every struggle you face today is its shadow. Every collapse feels unique to the people living through it, but history disagrees. History whispers that what you're experiencing right now is not new, not surprising, and definitely not accidental. Because before every empire falls, it performs the same ritual, a silent confession, a desperate act of self-preservation. It debases its money. Long before America printed its first dollar, the Romans were already teaching the world how power dies. Their empire stretched across continents, commanded armies, and reshaped civilization itself. But in the end, it wasn't the barbarian hordes that broke Rome, it was their own mint. For centuries, Roman coins were pure silver, solid, trusted, real. But wars are expensive. Roads, armies, monuments, and palaces bleed gold. And so the emperors, faced with rising costs, chose the easiest path. They diluted the silver. First by a little, then by a lot, then until the coins were mostly worthless tin, wrapped in a thin illusion of shine. The people didn't understand at first. Prices rose, wages stagnated, and the cost of bread doubled, then tripled. Citizens blamed merchants, soldiers, foreigners, never realizing the real enemy sat on the throne. Rome didn't fall in a single day. It rotted from within, coin by coin, lie by lie. Centuries later, the British Empire repeated the ritual. The pound sterling, once a mighty reserve currency, slowly decayed under the pressure of wars and debts. Each crisis justified a new, temporary measure, printing more notes, reducing gold reserves, expanding credit. The excuses varied, the pattern didn't. History kept speaking, nobody listened. Then came the 20th century, the age of modern finance. Wars became global, economies became intertwined, governments grew larger than kings. And with every new conflict, every recession, every political promise, the temptation returned. Print more money than you have, and hope nobody notices. World War I, World War II, the Cold War, the Great Society, foreign wars, domestic programs. Crisis after crisis, justification after justification. The pattern sharpened. Power demanded more money. Money demanded more manipulation. Manipulation demanded secrecy. By the mid-20th century, the United States, the new empire, was playing the same game Rome had mastered 1,700 years earlier. You can't fund endless wars and expanding bureaucracies with tax money alone. It's unpopular, it's slow, it's dangerous for politicians. So they did what every empire does when cornered. They cheated. They printed dollars faster than gold could back them. They inflated quietly, borrowing from the future to pay for the present. They told the world the dollar was strong, while hollowing it out from the inside. And if you chart these moments across history, something eerie appears. A perfect curve, a predictable cycle. Debasement arrow, inflation arrow, distrust arrow, collapse arrow, replacement. Like a heartbeat, like a drum, like a curse. Every time an empire tampers with its money, it gains a short burst of artificial strength, followed by a long decline. Every time the rulers disconnect currency from reality, the people eventually pay the price. This is not coincidence. It is architecture. The pattern is older than America, older than modern banking. It's the blueprint of power unraveling itself. And once you recognize it, everything becomes clear. Your struggles today are part of a script written thousands of years ago. The Romans debased their silver. The British debased their pound. The French inflated their assignats into oblivion. The Weimar Republic drowned itself in printed marks. Every empire believes it is different. Every empire insists it will escape the pattern. No empire ever does. Because the moment a government discovers it can create money without limit, it discovers something else. It can control people without limit. And once that door opens, it never closes again, until the collapse forces it shut. The pattern tells us something terrifying. No empire falls until its currency falls first. And when the money dies, everything built on top of it begins to shake. Wages, savings, pensions, homes, institutions, families, futures. This is why your grandparents thrived. They lived before the cycle hit its breaking point. They lived when money still carried weight, when savings meant something, when the system wasn't yet devouring itself. But the pattern was already moving, already tightening, already accelerating toward the moment everything changed. 1971 wasn't an isolated event. It was the climax of centuries of repetition, the echo of Rome, the shadow of Britain, the next chapter in a story as old as civilization. Your life today is not a byproduct of chance. You are living in the final movements of an ancient cycle, a cycle that every empire believes it can outsmart until the moment it can't. The pattern is the omen, the warning, the drumbeat in the distance, and it is getting louder. Your grandparents lived in a world you can barely imagine, not because it was simpler, but because it was fair. One income could raise a family. A factory worker could buy a home. A high school graduate could walk into a stable job and stay there for 30 years. A college degree was optional, not a financial death sentence. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was grounded, predictable, real. Compare that to today. You spend more years in school, more hours at work, and more energy just trying to stay afloat. And somehow, you end up with less security, less ownership, less future. But this isn't nostalgia. It's not society changing. It's not kids these days. It's the direct consequence of 1971. To understand the betrayal, you have to see the parallel. Two worlds placed side by side, one before the break and one after. Begin with housing. In your grandparents' era, a modest home cost just a few years of salary. There were no bidding wars, no corporate landlords, no 30-year chains of interest payments stretching into the horizon. A house wasn't an investment, it was a milestone of adulthood. Today, the same home costs 10 times more relative to income, and you're told it's because millennials buy lattes or urban demand is high. The truth is simpler. When money can be created without limit, assets skyrocket, and wages do not. Your grandparents lived before the decoupling. You live after it. Look at education. Your grandfather could work a summer job and pay his entire year of tuition. He graduated without debt. He built a life without a financial anchor chained to his ankle. You, on the other hand, may carry debts that linger for decades, not because education got better, but because money got weaker. When the dollar untethered from gold, its value became whatever those in power said it was. Tuition soared, student loans multiplied, and the price of opportunity rose faster than opportunity itself. Food, healthcare, childcare, everything climbed. But wages? They flatlined. Your grandparents' paycheck grew with productivity. Yours doesn't even keep up with rent. This is the parallel. Two generations, two realities, shaped by one event. The moment the financial world severed itself from restraint. The moment money became an instrument of manipulation instead of measurement. After 1971, the economy became something new, something fragile and distorted. Debt replaced savings. Credit replaced stability. Printing replaced production. Your grandparents built wealth through work. You build debt through survival. In the mid-20th century, Americans saved 10 to 15% of their income. Today, many save nothing at all, because nothing is left. Because the system slowly repurposed your life into collateral for the debts created above you. The parallel becomes even sharper when you examine wealth distribution. In your grandparents' time, a rising tide truly lifted most boats. Inequality existed, but the gap was narrow enough that ordinary people could still climb the ladder. After 1971, the ladder snapped. The top kept rising. Everyone else stayed on the ground. Every printed dollar gravitates upward, toward those who receive new money first. Banks, corporations, governments. By the time it reaches you, it's diluted, weaker, stripped of its earlier value. Your grandparents played a game with rules. You're playing a game where the rules rewrite themselves while you sleep. And then there's the psychological divide, the quiet despair your ancestors never carried. They feared war, recession, uncertainty, but they didn't fear that the entire system was rigged against them. They didn't wake up each day feeling like the horizon was drifting further away. You do. Because deep down, you sense the truth. You feel the invisible hand pushing you back. You feel the treadmill speeding up beneath your feet. You feel the promise slipping away. And when you compare your life to the lives of those before you, you're not imagining the difference. You're witnessing the fallout of a single rupture in economic reality. The world before 1971 wasn't perfect, but it was coherent. It rewarded effort. It punished excess. It functioned on the logic of real constraints. The world after 1971 is a hall of mirrors. Prices distort, money decays, wealth concentrates, debt expands, and ordinary people drown trying to keep up. The parallel is not symbolic. It is mathematical. It is systemic. It is engineered. Your grandparents didn't become wealthy because they were smarter or more disciplined or more deserving. They simply lived in the last chapter of a system still tied to reality. You live in the aftermath, in the long shadow of the break, in a world where money has been unmoored for over half a century, drifting further from value with every passing year. Once you see the parallel, you cannot pretend the two worlds are the same. The old world ended in 1971. The new one began with you. There's a moment in every story where the fog lifts, where confusion hardens into clarity, where you stop blaming yourself and start seeing them. Because what happened in 1971 wasn't an accident. It wasn't an unavoidable economic decision. It wasn't a technical adjustment. It was a transfer of power, a quiet, calculated rearrangement of the world. A betrayal carried out by the people who promised to protect the system, while secretly rewriting it for their own benefit. Let's peel back the final layer. When the dollar was tied to gold, governments were chained to reality. They couldn't spend beyond their means. They couldn't wage endless wars. They couldn't promise programs they couldn't afford. Gold was a leash, cold, heavy, and merciless, and the powerful hated it. They wanted freedom, not your freedom, theirs. The freedom to create money without earning it. The freedom to expand their influence without restraint. The freedom to break the rules while demanding you follow them. In 1971, they got what they wanted. When the dollar's anchor was cut, a new priesthood emerged. Quiet, unelected, untouchable. They became the architects of value, the creators of money, the custodians of your future. They didn't need your vote. They only needed your ignorance. These are the money priests, the central bankers, the mega financial institutions, the government agencies that operate in the shadows of policy papers and closed-door meetings. They replaced the gold standard with something far more powerful, the belief standard. Your money only has value because they say it does. Its supply expands when they choose. Its worth collapses when they miscalculate, and your life is swept along with every decision they make. Before 1971, money came from labor, production, and resources. After 1971, money came from them. This is the revelation. They didn't just change the currency, they changed the nature of wealth itself. Because once money could be created at will, those closest to the source became the new royalty. Banks, corporations, political elites. They receive the freshly printed money first, before it loses value, before inflation spreads, before the price hikes hit the public. They buy assets early. They accumulate land, stocks, companies, influence. By the time that same money trickles down to you, it's weaker, diluted, inflated, stripped of purchasing power. You receive the echo of value they already extracted. This isn't a bug in the system. It is the system. It is why the wealth divide exploded after 1971. It is why corporate power metastasized. It is why government debt spiraled into the stratosphere. It is why your wages stagnated while CEO pay soared. They aren't playing the same game you are. They're writing the rules as they go, and every rule serves the same purpose: to keep them above consequences and keep you below opportunity. Once you understand this, the world snaps into focus. Why did housing explode in price? Because cheap money made it a playground for the wealthy. Why did education become unaffordable? Because the government-backed loans ensured schools could raise prices without limit. Why are you drowning in debt? Because debt is the new form of control, interest payments flowing upward like tribute. Why does every crisis lead to more printing, more debt, more inequality? Because the money priests only grow stronger during collapse. Every downturn is a harvest, every bailout is a transfer, every stimulus is a siphon, and every generation becomes poorer, except the ones closest to the tap. The betrayal of 1971 wasn't just the end of the gold standard, it was the beginning of a new hierarchy, a world where value comes from decision, not discipline, where money flows upward, not outward, where you compete in an economy built to extract, not reward. Your grandparents were free from this machine. You are inside it, and the people who built it expect you to stay confused, exhausted, and compliant. They expect you to blame yourself, blame others, blame anything except the system they designed. But the revelation breaks the spell. Once you understand who benefits from this world, you understand who built it. Once you understand who built it, you understand why it feels impossible to escape. The betrayal is not a moment. It is a structure, a hierarchy, a quiet empire of paper and power. And for the first time in decades, the mask is slipping. You see them now, and they know it. Every cycle has a breaking point. Every system built on illusion eventually collapses under the weight of its own lies. And deep down, you can feel it. The tension in the air, the tremor beneath your feet, the quiet sense that something enormous is approaching. This is not paranoia. It is pattern. It is time catching up. Because when a currency drifts too far from reality, it begins to rot from within. Trust erodes. Stability cracks. People sense the shift long before the charts admit it. Your grandparents lived during the rise. You are living during the unraveling. The signs are everywhere. Savings no longer grow, they evaporate. Markets no longer reflect value, they reflect stimulus. Debt is no longer a burden, it is the backbone of the entire economy. Governments no longer hide their printing, they celebrate it. And ordinary people feel the walls closing in, not because they failed, but because the system has reached the final stage of its cycle. History has never been subtle about what comes next. Rome debased its silver until citizens refused to accept it. France printed its paper assignats into starvation. Weimar Germany inflated its currency into fire and desperation. Every empire repeats the ritual. Every currency eventually collapses under the pressure of too much promise and not enough truth. Now it's your generation's turn to face the inevitability. But here is the part history rarely tells you. Collapse is not only destruction, it is revelation. When the old system breaks, the real value reemerges. What is solid becomes precious. What is honest becomes powerful. What cannot be printed becomes the foundation of the next era. This is the moment for powerful fear, and the moment ordinary people can finally wake up. For decades, the money priests convinced you that the system was too complex to understand, too sacred to question, too stable to fail. They needed you to believe that your struggles were personal, not structural. They needed you tired, distracted, obedient. But the cracks are no longer cracks. They are fractures. And through them, light is leaking in. The inevitability is not doom for those who see it early. It is opportunity. Because once you understand the game, you stop being a piece on the board. You become a player. You stop saving in melting ice. You start storing value in things they can't print. You stop running on the treadmill. You start stepping off it. Gold, scarce assets, alternative stores of value, new monetary technologies rising from outside the system they created. The next era will belong to those who recognize the transition while others deny it. The system, built in 1971, is reaching its limit. Its logic is exhausted. Its debts are unpayable. Its illusions are fading. And the elites know it. That's why the printing accelerates. That's why the promises expand. That's why the narrative tightens. They're trying to hold together a world that has already begun to fall apart. But you don't have to fall with it. Truth is a form of wealth. Awareness is a form of armor. Understanding is the first step toward escape. The inevitability is not that you must lose, but that the old system must end. How you emerge from that ending depends on whether you remain asleep or awaken. Your grandparents lived through the golden era of a stable monetary world. You are living through its reckoning. And the generation that sees the truth, the generation that understands the betrayal, is the one that has the chance to rebuild something better. The future is not predetermined. The collapse is not final. The cycle does not end in darkness unless you walk into it blind. The inevitability is this: the truth always returns. Real value always reclaims its throne, and every empire of paper eventually kneels before reality. You cannot stop the cycle, but you can step outside it. You can choose what your grandparents never had to consider, and what the elites hope you never understand. When the system falls, you do not fall with it. You rise from it.